Wow,
That's what you're gonna have to open first.
and Jay is gonna take 7,000. Maybe. Literally was saying, I was like, oh no, I'm just gonna be sad. Like, every time I could go, I was like, you're taking a picture of something.
Okay.
What?
Why it turned so cold all of a sudden? It's like 20 degrees down. Huh? And here it's cold too, yeah. All right. Let's finish the protein lecture and go into, I would say, carbohydrates.
Sorry, so sad.
All right. Let's have a couple of recap questions. Why might the nitrogen conversion factor be different for different sources of protein? Do you remember that, Mary? Different amino acid composition. Do you remember which amino acids might play a key role? Yeah.
Glycine.
Very good. The basic amino acids, they have extra amine groups in their R chain. So that will cause percent nitrogen to be higher or lower in different protein sources. Okay. What are the 3 reaction steps of Keldal? Lukman. Digestion is one. Distillation, which part of it is neutralization, and then titration. Yes, okay, great. We will talk more about those steps during the lab on Wednesday. Okay. All right, so the next, a method that is based on nitrogen analysis as well, and it's also official method of analysis, is the DUMAS. So in this case, we also just measure nitrogen and convert to protein the same way in Keldal. The only difference here, it measures all types of nitrogen, not just the amine group nitrogen. That's why the estimation might be a little higher than Keldal, but not by a lot because those other nitrogens are really minor nitrogen in foods. Okay. So it's based on combustion, meaning the protein sample or the food sample is combusted at really high temperature. So this is our older unit. We have a newer unit that you will be working with, but essentially it has the same kind of components. So you have a carousel here where you have your samples weighed in little sample containers. So they can be tin capsules or gel capsules. So depending on the type of food. So you would weigh your sample in these little capsules, and then you put your capsules, there are different holes in this carousel to put your samples, and the carousel automatically turns, and each sample at a time gets dropped. It gets dropped into a combustion chamber, and it gets combusted at really high temperature, 850 to 950 degrees Celsius. So during this combustion, everything in your sample turn into gases. Okay, so everything on organic and inorganic turn into gases. And then the first thing that happens is that the first step, it goes through, not sure if the new system is the same, but Andresa will be talking to you about the different components of the system, but it goes through a scrubber, an initial scrubber that takes out some moisture. And then everything gets directed by inert gases to a compartment in the back. We call it the ballast. It's kind of like a cylindrical shape it might be different, the new unit. But all of your gases from your food that got combusted gets collected here and flushed with oxygen and mixed really well. Then they come back to the front. There are two scrubbers that will scrub H2O and CO2. So kind of like a schematic, but you have your gases that helps with the combustion, especially with oxygen here. And then it goes into the, scrubs up some moisture and then goes to get mixed with oxygen. And then it goes into either, depending on the unit, a kind of a GC column or scrubbers. Our unit has scrubbers to scrub out, that means takes out CO2 and H2O, and then goes into a copper finger compartment that reduces all of the nitrogen oxides into nitrogen gas. And then the nitrogen gas is carried by the inert carrier gas, which is helium, right? You have helium, yeah. And then it goes into the detector, which is thermal conductivity detector. Similar to the thermal conductivity detector that is described and used with GC. So it will be constantly measuring conductivity of helium, but then when nitrogen comes along, the conductivity changes, and that's what gets recorded and converted to percent nitrogen. So you get the readout. So you will weigh in a sample, and then you get the readout as percent nitrogen compared to your weight of sample that you used in those little crucible. And then you use that value, multiply it by conversion factor, and then you get your protein content. This whole thing is about few minutes long. Is it 4 minutes, Andressa? In this unit? Around, yeah, few minutes, 2 to 5 minutes, depending on the unit. So it's very, very fast in contrast to Keldal that takes hours and hours of work. So if we want to compare Keldal to Dumas, you need to remember a few things. What is the principle? Both are determining what? Both are based on what? Determining which component? Nitrogen. So both are determining nitrogen content and converting to protein, but one is chemical reactions. So Keldal is based on multiple chemical reactions happening and following the amine group, whereas in LICO, or LICO is the instrument, Dumas method, there's no chemical reaction, it's combustion. So no chemical reaction, no reagents, it's just purely combustion at really high temperature and measuring nitrogen content by thermal conductivity detector. So for Dumas, it's purely automated. The only thing you do is weigh the sample and then put it in the carousel. It might seem very simple to you, but there's a lot of work that the analysts do by calibration, making sure the system is maintained, cleaned. It's a very high maintenance equipment. But if it's functioning really well, then you can analyze a lot of samples in a short period of time. Once you do the calibration and the maintenance, you fill your carousel, and then you get a lot of samples analyzed. So it's purely automated instrument based, whereas Keldal, although you have the digestion block and then you have the distillation unit, some people are lucky, titration is also automatic for them. There is a Keldal unit for titration. It can be automated, but it takes a lot of time and it requires personnel with already knows the safety and working with reagents and understands the method. So it's more involved from the analyst time-wise. Cost. So the DUMAS instrumentation is very costly. Costs a lot of money, and also to maintain it, it costs a lot of money. So it's very expensive. Huh?
One drop is like $4.
No, but not how much per sample. What's the cost of the equipment? We're talking tens of thousands of dollars.
Car,
Huh?
a car.
Yeah, maybe more expensive than a car. Yeah, it is expensive. So we had to kind of pool money to buy it, figure out ways to buy it. Anyway, and also I send 3 people every year to go get training. Last year they went to Vegas. Andressa went to Vegas. They got the training, but you also had fun. So it does cost a lot of time and money to keep it going, but it does, it's much easier than Caldal because Caldal has other issues of getting reagents, corrosive reagents, more time of the analyst, and all of that. Okay, but it's cheaper. Caldal is much cheaper, and it does not require as much maintenance, and there's no Vegas trip involved with Caldal. So time, it takes definitely much less time if the instrument is working and calibrating and behaving well. It's very fast to run DUMAS, whereas Caldal, you need 2 to 3 hours of digestion and 2 to 3 hours of cooling time. Then you need probably 15 minutes to 20 minutes of distillation, and then 15, 20 minutes of titration, plus the time you need to prepare the reagents and make sure everything's working well. So it is very, very timely. Safety and chemicals. So Caldal, you need to have the safety training to work with corrosive reagents and such. Whereas DUMAS, you need just the training with the instrumentation, which does not involve any chemicals other than the standards that you use to calibrate. And both applications, both methods are official methods of analysis and can be used to all sorts of samples, liquid or solids. But Caldal might be a little bit more accurate than DUMAS, but sometimes it doesn't really matter depending on the food. Okay. So now that we talked about Caldal and DUMAS, let's talk about the methods that are not official methods of analysis. The infrared spectroscopy is used very often as a secondary method of analysis once it's calibrated, whereas all of the slew of methods are used for research in a purified form of protein in solution. All right, so let's talk a bit refresher about infrared. It has to be calibrated, and it is calibrated using official methods of analysis. So you might go into a company and into their labs, you might see a unit of Caldal sitting there, but it's really mostly used to calibrate their NIR. So they would run infrequently Caldal or DUMAS and then calibrate their IR instrument so that they can analyze samples more quickly. So IR radiation, it's based on vibration energy and specifically the peptide bonds for proteins. It's very rapid. Once it's calibrated, it's really rapid, can run multiple samples with minimal sample preparation. All right. It's really cold in this room. May I find myself talking fast, maybe to get warmer? No. I just realized, why am I rushing? Because I'm cold. Okay. Any question? I mean, breathe for a moment. I'm rushing because I'm cold. Do you have questions so far? Okay.
Question.
Yes.
What's your rosebud and thorn of the week?
Oh my God.
Okay. Oh gosh, the rose of this week. Again, seeing you guys. I can't think of anything better. Don't underestimate you. That's why I'm in academia. I like teaching. So it's a good answer. Thorn?
It's only Monday.
Huh?
It's only Monday.
Yeah, I have really full schedule. Not that I don't every week, but it's just this morning I had meeting after meeting after meeting. I can't even breathe. So that's possibly it. And what am I looking forward to? Um, I don't think anything wonderful is happening this week. Nothing I can think of. I will see. On Wednesday, you can ask me again in case things change. Like I told you, boring life. Not much is happening. Okay. I have a question for you. Oh, I didn't see you in College Bowl.
I told you I was not gonna be there. Marie. Did you see any?
You're coming this Friday. You're coming this Friday.
I said I'd be there this Friday, but I couldn't make it. I couldn't make it last Friday.
These two did and did good job.
Oh.
Yeah. So, if you say one thing about your experience, what would you say?
It was fun. Learn new things.
It is fun. It's a game. All right, come check it out. All right, can we go back to this now? All right, so research methods. So again, here with research methods, usually you have your protein in solution, more purified. You don't have very many interfering substances that might absorb at the same, let's say, wavelength that you will be using in spectroscopy. So, they're very, very important for us if we are isolating protein or if we want to determine protein content, especially if we're going to measure enzyme activity in a purified solution. So these methods are really important for research. So a very common one we actually do in our lab is the BCA method, which is bisynchronic acid method. It's a mouthful, but you can say BCA. So what this method is based on the reduction capability of the protein. So proteins can be reducing agents. For example, some components within the protein have capability to reduce, like cysteine, tryptophan, tyrosine. Also, peptide bonds can all act as reducing agent. So this method works by reducing a cupric ion to cuprous. So the protein in solution will reduce cupric to cuprous, and the cuprous ion react with BCA reagent to give you a unique color. And then you would measure that color, absorption of that color, but you have to have a standard. So in this case, our standard is a protein that is commonly used. BSA stands for bovine serum albumin. It's a very common protein that you can buy as a standard, or it can come with the kit itself, with the BCA kit. So what you do is you prepare your standard at different concentrations, measure absorption, and construct a standard curve. So we need to make sure that our standard curve is within a linear range. So we tend to dilute our protein solutions to fit that linear range that would work well for BSA. Now, it does have disadvantages that different proteins will have different amino acid composition. So might reduce cupric ions differently. So, or have a different rate of reduction. So BSA is kind of, that's why it's an estimation of protein content using the bovine serum albumin, but it's not a perfect estimation because the protein in your sample will be potentially different than bovine serum albumin, but in terms of estimation, it suffices. Okay. A Bradford dye binding method, you're going to do that in the lab as extra credit on Wednesday. Not on your food sample, you will be given a highly concentrated protein, a whey protein, And then you would just practice this research method using a very highly purified protein. So this method is dye binding. So basically, it's based on the ability of the protein to bind to a dye. And Bradford is a type of dye. So the binding is based on the amphoteric nature of proteins. Does anybody remember what amphoteric means?
With acidic and basic.
Yes, thank you. Yep. So that means the protein has the amine group and the carboxyl group, which makes them amphoteric components. And this binding with Bradford is based on this particular characteristics. And then you get a color again, and you measure using absorption spectroscopy in the visible range. It also requires that you have a standard curve. So again, in the lab, you're going to use bovine serum albumin as standard. You're going to prepare different concentrations. And basically, we have it as an extra credit. It won't be part of your report. If you put the Excel sheet, it will be extra credit. Of the calculation will be extra credit. But the reason we do it is for you to kind of start learning using spectrophotometer. Because if in the following lab, you will be needing to use a spectrophotometer. And we have 3 groups and 2 stations, the Caldal and the Dumas. So the 3rd group will be needing to do something. So we will use up your time to learn spectroscopy and plotting standard curves and all of that. That will be helpful for the following lab. And also it gets to show you an example of another method where it would work on a sample as high protein. The reason we don't use research methods for complex food samples is because you might have different components that might absorb at the same wavelength, and also it's different components might cause turbidity, which would cause overestimation. So it's not really great for complex matrices like the food samples that you have. Another research method which we often use is absorption at 280. Actually, this is usually, if we're doing chromatography with proteins, we link UV detector and we monitor protein content or the protein as it comes out of the column using absorption at 280. This is very common. But also, if you have protein solution, you can still measure protein concentration by measuring absorption at 280, but also you need standard curve. And again, bovine serum albumin can be used as standard to prepare standard curve. Now, this can be used for all sorts of protein because all proteins have a certain proportion of tyrosine, tryptophan, and also phenylalanine that absorb UV light. However, if we want to determine the protein content in a hydrolyzed sample, that means you have peptides rather than a full sequence of protein. Not every peptide might have tyrosine, tryptophan, or phenylalanine in it. Could be a segment of a full protein that does not have these. So for peptides or for a sample that has proteins and peptides, we can use measuring absorption at 220, which is the wavelength for peptide bonds. Okay, questions. We need a facility management to do something in this room. It's so cold. Okay. Questions about proteins? Okay. All right. So let's move. Why is this here this time around? Okay. Right. Carbohydrate analysis. Who's super excited about carbohydrate analysis? Nobody. Okay, it's fine. Thought Emma would say, I'm super excited. No? Okay, I'm telling George. Huh? Actually, it is has fun elements, I would say. Okay. Let's start with this fun fact. Did you do the food chemistry exam on carbohydrates? Yeah? Okay, Katie is the only one that is confessing to this reality. Okay. All right. So, what's the answer? When in doubt, and you should be in doubt because no, it's not all the above. Huh? Pectin and cellulose are? All right, that's why he's coming to College Bowl, you guys. Okay, yes. Pectin and cellulose are carbohydrates. Lignin is not a carbohydrate. What is it? Is it a dietary fiber? Is lignin? Yes. Everything we can digest in food is dietary fiber, right? Even resistant starch is dietary fiber. Okay, so anything that resists digestion is dietary fiber. Lignin is not a carbohydrate because its building blocks are not sugars. So these are the building blocks of lignin. So it's not glucose, it's not, what's the pectin? Glucuronic acid? Glucuronic acids? Yeah, so it's not a carbohydrate base. So it is not carbohydrate, but it's dietary fiber. And this is very confusing when a lot of people think that dietary fiber are just carbohydrates. Okay. All right. More chemistry questions. It's very important that we know a little bit of the chemistry so that we understand the analysis. Okay. Do you happen to know this? Huh? It is true. You're just guessing.
I just feel like there's similar things, so then it maybe.
Are they similar? Are they not similar? What's the definition of what's starch gelatinization?
Swelling.
Huh?
Oh.
Okay, yeah, it is. It is swelling of starch in the presence of water and heat. Okay. All right. What's starch retrogradation then?
The opposite.
What's that?
The opposite.
Well, retrograded starch is the crystallization of gelatinized starch. So raw starch, when you put water and heat, becomes gelatinized starch. Then when you cool down over time, thus gelatinized starch retrograde. If you leave a piece of bread out, that's the staling. So you cook the dough, you gelatinize the starch, you form a nice loaf of bread, but leave it out for a while, your starch will retrogradate, and that gives you the staling sensation. Pasta, for example, that retrogradation is really important because it helps with the texture and formation of the pasta. So retrogradation in bread is not so great because it causes staling. Retrogradation in pasta is needed to get your pasta hardening. Okay. And to answer this question, it's yes, although they are opposite, but we'll talk about the method later. The fun fact is, yes, the same method can be used for both, but we'll talk about the method later. All right. Tell me a little bit about carbohydrate, even though they're not as important as protein, but let's talk about their importance. They have some function.
For the main source of energy. Yes.
Good job. That's very important. Yes, main source of energy. Very good. What else? Why are they important in food? Exactly. Structure, texture of food, very important. What else?
They taste good.
Huh?
They taste good.
What?
They taste good.
Matter of opinion. They contribute to taste and color by, which is your favorite reaction, Emma?
Maillard.
Yeah. All right. Other than that, what else? Think from health perspective. Dietary fiber. Most of dietary fiber is carbohydrate. Dietary fiber. Okay, what else?
Sweetness.
Huh? Yes, definitely. And the sugar can help with, like when you add sugar, remember in the olden days, the preserves. Yeah, well, fermentation, but also water activity, yes. So yeah, decreasing water activity, enhancing shelf life. The other one here, you said all of it. The other one here is resistance starch and glycemic index. And this is important because we talked about retrograded starch, for example, is resist digestion. So what are the 4 types of resistant starch? College ball question. Can you tell me one type of resistant starch? We just talked about one type of resistant. Huh?
The ligand.
Lignin is not
No.
starch, right? But one type of resistant starch is retrograded starch, right? It resists digestion. Resistant starch resists digestion. All right, so retrograded starch is resistant starch. What other type of starch is huh? Well, resistant starch acts as fiber, it becomes dietary fiber, and when you measure dietary fiber, resistant starch goes into the dietary fiber component. But starch, what type of starch is resistant starch or resist digestion?
Cornstarch.
What? Cellulose is not starch,
Okay.
but you're trying. It's good. It's fine. It's trying. I want to go back. What did you say? Yeah, you just said.
Cornstarch.
Okay, so it's not necessarily cornstarch per se, anything that is raw starch. So if you eat potato starch raw, if you eat cornstarch raw, you're not going to be able, our enzymes will not be able to digest. The starch needs to be gelatinized in order for it to be digested. Okay, so raw starch, retrograded starch, chemically modified starch. Whatever Luckman did, he did something and he found chemically modified starch. Very good, yes. Okay, there's one more. Physically entrapped starch. Sometimes entrapped starch in cell wall material is hard for the enzymes to reach. So you have to break the cell wall material to reach to the starch, and you have to gelatinize the starch for it to be available. So, long story, so resistant starches are not hydrolyzed, so glycemic index, they're good for people with diabetes or pre-diabetes because they don't increase the glycemic index because they're not well digested. We don't get all the glucose into the bloodstream. All right, so carbohydrates, I'm freezing you guys. Carbohydrates, seriously, my hand is like ice. Okay, so they're not too bad after all, right? Okay, so why do we analyze them? Thank you. Yep, we need total carbohydrate, which is by difference. What else is on the nutrition label? Dietary fiber, thank you very much. And what else? Total sugar, total added sugar. All right, so very good. What else? Why do we analyze carbohydrate? Claims? Like sugar-free, for example. Claim. Yeah, okay. Yes. What else? It wasn't one, huh?
Functionality.
Functionality, yes, exactly. We measure starch to determine functionality in food, different food products. So product development, I would say. Okay, so quality control, much sugar do we have, much available sugar for fermentation. So especially when we ferment yogurt or when we ferment bread, we need to make sure we have enough sugars for the fermenting organism. Okay, ingredient authentication and research, obviously. So what does George do all day, Emma?
Sit in his.
I'm not putting that, I'm not repeating that on the recorded lecture. He studies starch day long, day
Oh, yeah,
night.
that too.
Starch from different not foods even, from different grains and sources, seeds, to see how they might impact food formulations. So, yeah. Okay. So we look at different different dietary fibers. We have the soluble dietary fiber, we have the insoluble dietary fiber. Within the soluble dietary fiber, we have different components, beta-glucans, for example, have a lot of health benefit. So looking at doing research to understand different components that come from different food ingredients and in food products from a health perspective, from a functionality perspective, from a cost perspective, there's a lot to be done. Okay. Oh, there you go. Nutrition label, the different components. Okay. All right. So, very, very brief classification of carbohydrate. We need bonfire at this point. It's this point. Okay. So monosaccharides, di and oligosaccharides, the polysaccharides. So starch, dietary fiber, with the exception of lignin. Lignin is not a polysaccharide. Okay. So what we normally need to do before analyzing carbohydrate is the first step, especially if it has moisture more than 10%, we need to dry. So drying, and we try to select a drying method that will not cause changes in the chemical composition. So here I have vacuum drying, but freeze drying, if it's available, would be the better route to maintain the characteristics of the carbohydrate and avoid burning and all of that. And then we need to remove fat for high fat containing substances because they are interfering substances in the analyses. So usually we extract fat either by batch extraction, with like hexane extraction, batch extraction, or Soxhlet, which is semi-continuous as you saw in the lab. So the method that we will be doing in the lab, not this week, but next week, is a simple total carbohydrate assay. If you remember, I told you when we first started the proximate analysis section, I said there is not one method that measures all forms of carbohydrates in one go. And then now you're going to say, oh, so you lied to us, Pam. Now this method measures total carbohydrates. Well, it does in a simple matrices like juices, or that you will be analyzing total carbohydrate in 7-Up and in beer next week. So there are not much there. There is potentially in beer, alcohol and sugars, and then in 7-Up, acids and sugar. So not much is there. So there are not in many interfering substances. So yes, we can measure total carbohydrate in such simple matrices. Or when we have isolated carbohydrate during an assay. And we know that there are not much out there other than mostly carbohydrate or a little bit of protein and carbohydrate. Andressa does this method a lot. Like, do you like this method? No. A lot of work? Yeah, it is. It does require that we work with corrosive H2SO4 concentrated and phenols, which are toxic. So, but once you have the safety training and you're doing everything the way you should, it should be okay. So basically, it's used for semi-purified samples or a very simple beverage matrix. So we can still use that, this method. So what is this method? It's called phenol sulfuric acid method. Basically, we use sulfuric acid to digest and phenol to react with the resulting component. So that's what it is. Phenol sulfuric acid method for measuring total carbohydrates in a simple matrix. So what happens is when you put acid, it's an exothermic reaction. So you have your liquid sample with some carbohydrates in it, and then you put the acid in, it generates heat. So acid and heat, they're going to break glycosidic bonds. So all the carbohydrates that you have will be broken down into monomers, monosaccharides. So these monosaccharides, also in the presence of heat and acid, will convert to furans. So a series of enolization, which is dehydration reaction. So double bond. So you will have carbons will form double bonds, and you would lose hydrogen, H2O. And then these components will be called, it's a mixture of furans, depending if you have glucose, fructose, galactose, all will form different forms of furans. But these furans can react with the phenol, with a phenol in the system. So your furans will react with phenol in the presence of acid, will give you a chemical product that absorb light, basically. That have lambda max, absorption maxima, or lambda max. That means the lambda at which we get maximum absorption somewhere between 480 to 490. And in the lab, you will empirically determine this lambda max. You need standard curve, and the standard that we usually build is a glucose standard. So you would prepare different concentration of glucose, and you would prepare your standard curve, and then you do series of dilutions. So yeah, your sample fits the linear standard curve, and then you would estimate your sugar or the carbohydrate concentration in your sample. Now, it is, if you know the carbohydrate composition of your sample, then you would want to have standards that represent the monomers in your sample. So if most of your monomers are glucose, then yeah, you can prepare a standard curve of glucose standard. If you know you have sucrose in there and you have fructose that comes out and glucose, then you might want to have a mixture of fructose and glucose in your standard to prepare standard curve. Why? Because it's not a stoichiometric reaction. Do you know what that means? What is a stoichiometric reaction from your general chemistry? Yes? Yeah, so all of the compounds will generate at the same concentration, same amount of compound that has color. But it's not. Fructose might generate different number of furans than glucose, than lactose, well, galactose, and other monomers. Okay, so that's why it's very important that we try to produce a standard curve that is in similar composition of monomers in your sample. If we don't know, you just go with glucose and accept that there will be errors. And usually it's a research method, so it's kind of a comparative. You use it as a comparison between different samples, so they're all treated the same way and they're all analyzed the same way. Okay. All right, so now I'm gonna go into breaking the carbohydrate analysis into different components. So we have analysis of mono, di, and oligosaccharides. Then I will talk about analysis of starch, and then analysis of dietary fiber. So we'll start with mono and oligosaccharides, monodianosaccharides. So I will be talking about three different categories of analysis, colorimetric methods, mostly for measuring reducing sugars. And it's based on reduction of cupric ions to cuprous. We have several methods, but they have similar principle, and the most common is Moody-Nansen method. And then we're going to talk about chromatographic method because you love chromatography so much. We spent 6 lectures, 7 lectures, I don't know how many lectures on chromatography. Now we're going to talk about application of chromatography for monodi and oligosaccharides analysis. And then there are enzymatic methods. Enzymes are great, and we are used as analytical tools. Yeah, I'm going to talk about that. Okay. But did we get to time? Got to time. I'm not going to start this. I'll start it next time. Okay. Next time, bring blankets, wool, socks. Huh? Yeah, a little space heater. Okay.
I have like till 5 p.m. Oh, I can't even make like